Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. The UN atomic watchdog has reached an agreement with Iran to continue its necessary verification and monitoring Tehran's nuclear activities for up to 3 months. In a press briefing following his return from Iran, the IAEA's chief, Rafael Grossi, said there will be less access and no more snap inspections from Tuesday. Grossi said talks with Iranian officials have produced a good, reasonable result that salvages the situation for now. In Myanmar, a general strike is being observed to oppose the military coup as thousands of protesters have gathered across the country. The new demonstration started despite the military ruler's threat that confrontation would cost more lives. Earlier, Washington said it will continue to take firm action against Myanmar's authorities over violence. In India, hundreds of thousands of people have gathered in northern Punjab state to show strength against the new farm laws. It is one of the largest rallies against the central government's controversial laws so far. The farmer leaders also called on supporters to amass outside the capital, New Delhi, on the 27th of February. The World Health Organization says the coronavirus outbreak will end in early 2022. WHO's Director for Europe, Hans Kluge, said the pandemic will still be prevalent in 2021, but more manageable than the last year. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.4 million lives and infected more than 111 million people so far. Pakistan has reported 16 deaths overnight, the lowest number of fatalities since the second wave started in the country. And in the Pakistan Super League, Lahore Qalandars will take on Quetta Gladiators today at the National Stadium in Karachi. Earlier, Qalandars beat Peshawar Zalmi by 4 wickets to register their first win of the tournament. Islamabad United also opened their winning account in the league by defeating Multan Sultans by 3 wickets. For more news in detail, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. The UN atomic watchdog has reached an agreement with Iran to continue its necessary verification and monitoring of Tehran's nuclear activities for up to 3 months.
In a press briefing following his return from Iran, the IAEA's chief Rafael Grossi said there will be less access and no more snap inspections from Tuesday. Grossi said talks with Iranian officials produced a good, reasonable result that salvages the situation for now. The IAEA chief said the understanding allows the parties to suspend or extend the agreement. He added that temporary bilateral technical understanding also paves way for political consultations at other levels. Grossi's visit to Iran came before a February 23rd deadline set by Iran's parliament for the U.S. to lift crippling sanctions or Tehran will halt snap IAEA inspections. Earlier, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif also said that the U.S. must take corrective measures to revive the JCPOA.
A senior White House official says the United States has begun communications with Iran over its detention of American citizens. In an interview, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the United States will not accept unlawful detention of its nationals. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said that Iran has received messages from Swiss embassy and other states to pursue this issue. However, Saeed Khatibzadeh debunked the claims of direct talks with the United States. He reiterated that Iran's policy is to get released its prisoners in the United States, adding that Iran is ready to address the issue. The UN envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, has expressed disappointment over the lack of any progress in the latest prisoner exchange talks. Griffith urged the warring parties to continue discussions to expand the arrangements for release of more detainees. He called for unconditional release of all sick, elderly, and children detainees, as well as civilians, including women and journalists. The latest round of UN-backed negotiations for a prisoner exchange ended without a deal. Yemen's internationally recognized government and the Houthi rebels blamed each other for the lack of progress. In January, the negotiations began in Jordan with the aim of freeing a total of 300 prisoners on both sides. In Myanmar, a general strike is being observed to oppose the military coup as thousands of protesters have gathered across the country. The new demonstration started despite the military ruler's threat that confrontation would cost more lives. Businesses remained shut as local stores and international chains announced closures. The call was made by the civil disobedience movement to make a spring revolution. Locals said that internet was blocked again, while forces have set roadblocks at strategic points in Yangon. Earlier, Washington said it will continue to take firm action against Myanmar's authorities over violence. In India, hundreds of thousands of people have gathered in northern Punjab state to show strength against the new farm laws. It is one of the largest rallies against the central government's controversial legislation so far. The farmer leaders also called on supporters to amass outside the capital, New Delhi, on the 27th of February. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of Indian growers have already been camped outside Delhi for nearly 3 months. Earlier, farmer leaders organized another grand meeting as part of the ongoing protests. Both sides have met for several rounds of negotiations but failed to break the deadlock. Growers have vowed to carry on the protest until the laws are rolled back. Iran has asked India to respect the rights of the people of occupied Kashmir and let them decide their destiny. In an interview, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said that Iran can play a constructive role to bring the conflict to an end. He added that Iran's policy has been very clear when it comes to the rights of all people, including the Kashmiris. Zarif said that Iran is in talks with both New Delhi and Islamabad to resolve the issue per the interests of the Kashmiris. Pakistan has repeatedly called on the international community to urge India to allow Kashmiris their right to self-determination. China has called for a reset in its relations with the United States. Speaking at a forum sponsored by China's foreign ministry, top diplomat Wang Yi described the bilateral relations at a crossroads. Wang urged the United States to respect China's core interest and stop smearing the ruling Communist Party. He called on Washington to lift restrictions on trade and cease interference in Chinese territories. Wang added the two powers can work together on global challenges if they repair bilateral relationship. He reiterated that Beijing was ready to reopen constructive dialogue with Washington aimed at solving problems. The relations between the two countries remained strained over a host of issues, including trade, pandemic, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Xinjiang. Libyan Interior Minister Fatih Bashagha says that he escaped a well-planned assassination attempt. Gunmen fired on his motorcade in the capital, Tripoli, wounding at least one of his guards. In an interview, Bashagha said that one of his guards and one of the attackers were killed in the exchange of fire. He said his guards pursued the vehicle and it overturned. He added that they arrested 2 people, one of whom was wanted by the police. UN envoy Jan Kubis condemned the incident on Twitter and called for an investigation. He said such reckless acts pose threats to stability and security and aim at derailing the political process. In Niger, 7 election workers have been killed and 3 others wounded during a presidential vote when their vehicle struck a landmine. The incident marred a day meant to usher in the country's first democratic transition of power. A local official said that the vehicle was taking election workers to polling stations when it was targeted near the border with Mali. Earlier in the day, polls closed in the second round of the presidential election. Ruling party candidate Mohamed Bazoum remains the favorite after leading in the first round with over 39% of the votes. He is up against former President Mahamadou Ousmane, who scored 17%. The World Health Organization says the coronavirus outbreak will end in early 2022. WHO's Director for Europe, Hans Kluge, said that the pandemic will still be prevalent in 2021, but more manageable than the last year. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.4 million lives and infected more than 111 million people so far. More on the coronavirus in this report.
The number of new coronavirus cases in the hardest hit areas around the world is decreasing. However, the new variants are causing the cases to flare up in many other regions. In Britain, more than 17.6 million people have received their first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, while daily deaths and cases also slipped. In Italy, a top virologist has warned that coronavirus cases are rising again largely due to the more transmissible variant first detected in the UK. Meanwhile, the United States COVID-19 death toll is approaching 500,000, with President Joe Biden planning to memorialize the lives lost. The U.S. infectious diseases official Dr. Anthony Fauci said Americans may still be wearing masks in 2022.
We are still at a level that's very high. What I don't and none of my colleagues want to see is when you look at that slope to come down that to say, wow, we're out of the woods now, we're in good shape. We're not, because the baseline of daily infections is still very, very high. It's not the 300 to 400,000 that we had some time ago, but we want to get that baseline really, really, really low before we start thinking that we're out of the woods.
Japan's vaccine rollout has encountered problems only less than a week after it was launched. Meanwhile, quarantine-free travel from New Zealand to Australia has resumed ahead of a downgraded alert level expected in Auckland today. Australia has started its mass COVID-19 vaccine program as the country looked set to report no local cases for the third straight day.
It gives me an assurance that I am actually protected in any instance. If anything happens, I know that I'm actually protected. So it gives me a great confidence that I can actually walk into those sites and do my duty as normal without any fear and go back to my family, making sure that I'm not going to be passing them anything.
India's COVID-19 death toll is approaching 11 million mark as Western Maharashtra state is set to impose new restrictions in 4 districts. Meanwhile, in a report, World Bank said Palestinians' COVID-19 vaccination plan faces a $30 million funding shortfall.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 16 people have died of the coronavirus during the past 24 hours. It is the lowest number of fatalities reported since the second wave of the outbreak in the country. The last time the country reported 16 deaths was on the 17th of October. The country's death toll has jumped to 12,617. The ministry says 1,160 tests came out positive yesterday. Meanwhile, there are more than 24,000 active cases in Pakistan at present. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, 4 people have died from the Ebola virus during a new outbreak in North Kivu province. Authorities have warned people not to resist measures to contain the highly contagious disease. Health officials say they already have registered 6 Ebola cases. 2 people are receiving treatment near Butembo city. A vaccination drive was launched last week, but people in the region resisted the measures. The 12th outbreak of Ebola was declared on the 7th of February when new cases were reported in the same province. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, in Haiti, hundreds hit the streets of the capital city of Port-au-Prince demanding the President Jovenel Moïse's removal from power. This follows an escalation of the constitutional crisis in the Caribbean country. The demonstrators called Moïse a dictator supported by the United States and other international organizations. They vowed to continue their struggle until he was removed from power. The opposition claims Moïse should step down as his 5-year term in office expired on the 7th of February. But the president argues he took power in February 2017 and will step down next year. In Laos, people voted for the National Assembly's 9th legislature and the 2nd Provincial People's Council in a general election. The National Polls Committee said 224 candidates contested for the National Assembly, while 789 candidates ran for the Provincial People's Council. For more than 4 million eligible voters, over 7,000 polling stations have been established across the country. The National Assembly is the highest authority and legislative body of Laos, responsible for enacting the constitution and the laws. In Afghanistan, over 300 police and customs officials have been sacked for indulging in corruption. The government says that the cases have been referred to the Attorney General's office. In a statement, Deputy Interior Minister Major General Abdul Sabur Khane said that the corrupt officers will be replaced with qualified ones. The sackings followed a 3-week strike by goods transporters over the corruption allegations. A transporters union has threatened more agitation if the promised reforms do not come. Thousands of people have fled to temporary shelters as the tropical storm DUJUAN submerged dozens of villages in the southern Philippines. Country's Disaster Risk Management Agency said 2 regions, including the country's nickel mining hub of Caraga, were hit the hardest. It said that the floods also damaged some houses and bridges in the province of Surigao del Sur. The bad weather also prompted the cancellation of at least 36 domestic flights. Philippines Weather Bureau said heavy rains are expected to continue over Caraga and several other provinces today. Israel has closed all Mediterranean beaches as an offshore oil spill deposited tons of tar across more than 160 kilometers of the coastline. The Environmental Protection Ministry is trying to find the ship responsible for the spill. Officials said that the spill is the worst ecological disaster and will take months or years to clean up. They said that the event began last week during a winter storm, which made it harder to see the tar approaching and deal with it at sea. The deposits have wreaked havoc on local wildlife as a dead young fin whale washed up on the beach after ingesting the vicious black liquid. United Airlines says it is grounding 24 Boeing 777 airplanes with the same type of engine that suffered a failure after takeoff on Saturday. This comes after the Federal Aviation Authority said its inspections will require some planes to be temporarily grounded. In a statement, the authority said that it will step up the inspections of 777 aircraft with Pratt & Whitney 4000 engines. United Airlines said that it will work with the United States regulators to ensure that the aircraft meet rigorous safety standards. Boeing has also recommended suspension of its use of 777 jets with Pratt & Whitney engines. Meanwhile, Japan has asked the airlines to use Boeing 777s with the same engine to avoid its airspace. A 14-year-old girl in the United Kingdom has undergone a new type of heart transplant that is gaining popularity around the world. Freya Headington had a successful operation after the new technique reduced her waiting time for a heart. More in this report.
In August 2019, Freya Headington was diagnosed with restrictive cardiomyopathy, which can cause tiredness and breathing problems. Doctors proposed using a new procedure to help the girl reduce the waiting time for a transplant. Thanks to the program, Freya got a new heart in only 8 weeks. The teenager left hospital 10 days after her operation and within months. Her father is delighted after she again started doing the things she loved most.
Ecstatic that I got such an amazing gift of a heart, but it's also upsetting to know that someone also died.
It'll always be there in the back of our minds, but you know, we know now she's got a lovely, healthy heart, and her future's bright.
The procedure, which started in Cambridge, can retrieve donor hearts that stop beating on their own after life support is withdrawn. A special device is able to restart the heart and ensure it is healthy before it is transplanted into a patient. In 2015, the hospital in Cambridge became the first in Europe to transplant adult donor hearts that had stopped beating on their own. For a few years, the procedure was exclusively helping adults in need of transplants. However, the Royal Papworth Hospital and Great Ormond Street Hospital is now ensuring that children can also benefit from it.
For many of our transplant patients now, they're so sick that they have to wait in the hospital for their transplant, sometimes for 6 months, perhaps even over a year. So not only is it reducing wait times, but it's transplanting patients that otherwise would not get an organ.
6 of the new types of pediatric heart transplants have taken place in the UK in 2020. Only 4 others have been carried out worldwide.
A 139-year-old house in San Francisco has been moved 6 blocks away from its original location on a truck. The move was made possible by an extensive team of engineers and a construction team of workers. The mint green Victorian house was loaded onto a flatbed truck and moved to a new location. Spectators turned out to cheer and take pictures as the 5,000-square-foot house began its journey. Construction workers are needed to cut the back branches so the house could pass down tree-lined streets. The cost of moving the 6-bedroom house was roughly $400,000. Local media reported that a developer plans to build an apartment building on the site where the house once stood. Feeling frustrated and stressed out, well, Brazilians can now vent their anger and fury in the newly opened Rage Room. More in this report.
Inside a warehouse on the outskirts of Sao Paulo, people can swing giant hammers at old televisions, computers, and printers, demolishing the machines and shredding the glass into tiny pieces. This is not an exhibition of insanity, but merely a way to release pent-up stress and anger amid a seemingly everlasting pandemic. All people have to do is pay a fee of $4.64.
This is good for those who live here. It takes me almost 2 hours to get to work and 2 hours back. You have that feeling also during this pandemic, worrying about your health, but it's great to come here and release some adrenaline and pent-up feelings.
The owner of the business says he has received a fair number of customers since the opening of the Rage Room a month ago.
I think it was the best moment to be able to set this up here in Cidade Tiradentes, related to everything that people are going through, a lot of anxiety, stress. Sometimes people miss work or even work a lot at home. I believe this here is like an escape at the moment.
Customers say releasing their stress in the Rage Room stops them from taking it out on other people, like family and friends.
Stocks in the Asia-Pacific are trading mixed as China left its benchmark leading rate unchanged over the weekend. Mainland Chinese stocks traded lower with Shenzhen Component down 1.3% and Shanghai Component fractionally lower. South Korea's Kospi also traded lower at 0.05%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index gained 0.46%, Japan's Nikkei 225 rose 0.96%, and the Topix Index gained 0.83%. Meanwhile, the ASX 200 in Australia rose fractionally. In the Pakistan Super League, Lahore Qalandars will take on Quetta Gladiators today at the National Stadium in Karachi. Both teams are playing their second match in the league. Earlier, Qalandars beat Peshawar Zalmi by 4 wickets to register their first win of the tournament. Shaheen Shah Afridi was named man of the match for his splendid bowling spell, bagging 3 wickets. Meanwhile, Islamabad United also opened their winning account by defeating Multan Sultans by 3 wickets. Despite losing early wickets, United managed to chase down a 150-run target with 6 balls to spare. Luis Gregory remained unbeaten with 49 runs and was declared man of the match. In football, RB Leipzig cruised past Hertha Berlin 3-0 in their Bundesliga encounter to move within 2 points of the leaders Bayern Munich. The win comes as Leipzig's 4th consecutive win in the German league. Marcel Sabitzer, Nordi Mukiel and Willy Orban netted 1 each to seal Leipzig's win. In the English Premier League, Manchester United returned to second place on the points table with a 3-1 win over Newcastle United. Marcus Rashford, Daniel James, and Bruno Fernandes were on target for United. United are now 10 points behind leaders Manchester City, who beat Arsenal 1-0 at the Emirates Stadium. In other fixtures, West Ham United downed Tottenham Hotspurs 2-1, while Leicester City edged Aston Villa 2-1. Moving on to Spanish La Liga, where Cadiz last-minute penalty put an end to Barcelona's winning run, as they held the third place to a 1-1 draw. The draw leaves Barca 8 points behind leaders Atletico Madrid. Meanwhile, Monaco stunned Paris Saint-Germain with a shock 2-0 win in the French Ligue 1. It's now time to take a look at the weather around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.